Hello, and welcome to part 2 of this episode of The Disgruntled Yid. And once again, I am your host, Moshe, aka The Disgruntled Yid. So, in the last section, or in the first part, we were talking about the concept of moral agency and free will and all of that. So what that means is that that God expects us to act as free moral agents, and therefore to choose between good and evil. And then I'm going to bring up 2 examples of this that I particularly really think are great. So there's a Jewish one and sort of a Christian one. It's not real because it's not like in the Bible. It's in a Christian movie sort of interpretation of the Bible. You'll see what I mean. But to start out, so I was thinking about that now. I can't remember what the first one was. Well, maybe it'll come back to me. So, okay, fine. The second one is, again, it's not really like real because it's not like in the Bible per se, but there's a movie that I saw, and it's I think the movie is literally just called Jesus, if I remember, or the Jesus movie. No, the Jesus movie is something else. This I think it's called The Story of Jesus, and the movie is supposed to be the story of Jesus, but from Jesus' more human perspective, which is kind of like what Last Temptation of the Christ is, in a much more stark, more artistic sort of, more dramatic, I would say much more dramatic fashion, and there's a lot of like stuff that's in there that's definitely not part of the Bible story. This is not like that. This is pretty faithful to the biblical story, but with some little creative liberties taken in, and one of those little creative liberties is there's a scene where Jesus is being tempted in the garden by Satan. And in it, he takes Jesus into the future and shows him terrible things that are going to happen. Like one of them is he shows a woman that's about to be burned at the stake, and the guy says, in the name of Jesus, we burn this witch. And then another one is it shows the Crusaders, and it shows these guys on horseback with their swords screaming, "In the name of Jesus Christ!" And then it shows World War I, and Jesus and Satan are just walking through a battlefield, and there's a French guy who's dying, on the battlefield, and he's has his hands out and he's screaming in French, and in English it translates to, "Please Jesus, please Jesus, receive my spirit." And Satan's all cheeky about it, and he goes, a world at war. What a concept, huh? And he goes, and that is what your creations are going to do. Look at all this destruction that they're going to cause. And so basically the whole point of this exercise is that he's trying to convince Jesus that his death on the cross will mean nothing because look at all the terrible stuff that will happen. Like, what's the point? He'll die. He literally keeps taunting him, like in his ear, and he keeps going, "You will have died in vain." And then Jesus finally, he like stands up real tall, and he like puts his chest out and he says probably one of the coolest, retorts or whatever, which I think, oddly enough, really kind of explains, strangely enough, the Jewish perspective on the idea of free will. Oddly enough, from a movie about Jesus. But he looks at Satan and he says to him, he says, "My Father loved mankind so much that he gave them the choice to choose between good and evil." Which I think was like the most badass retort or whatever. But also that's exactly what Jews believe. That's exactly what we believe. That God, who is our Father and loves us as his children, gave us the freedom to choose between good and evil because he loves us. Because he loves us enough and respects us enough to give us that choice. I'm running a tub, so give me just 1 second so I can make sure it's not overflowing. Nope, we're good. I'm gonna have to check again in a little bit, but, yeah. Oh, and the first thing that I was going to bring up, I just remembered. In Judaism, there's in the Torah, right before the people enter the Promised Land, Moses has a final address to the people, which the entire book of Deuteronomy is sort of a recap of everything that's been talked about in all the previous other 4 books of the Torah. It's sort of like I don't know, you could call it like a conclusion. When you write a book and you have, the introduction, then you explain the main concept and then the conclusion. So the idea is that Deuteronomy, the whole book of Deuteronomy, is supposed to be a conclusion of Moses giving over the general outline of everything that has passed previously, and he's wrapping it all up to the nation as his final message before he passed away. In it, at one point, he goes to a mountain, and he proclaims a whole series of blessings and a whole series of terrible curses, which he announces to the people, and then he finishes it with the famous line, Moses saying, "And therefore God says, I have given," and this is not even Moses' words; these are God's himself's words, and therefore God says, "I have laid before you the blessing and the curse. I have given you the choice between life and death. Choose life." And that's the famous, very famous, and that's where basically God is outlining the what's going to happen if the people, when they enter the land, if they obey God and they follow the commandments and they, serve God as and follow the laws of the Torah, and that their society will be good, they'll have peace, they'll have success, they'll have material and spiritual blessings, and if they disobey God and they sin, that they will be punished and they will be reprimanded severely, and if that doesn't work, will eventually even be exiled and expelled from the land. And so that's a very famous, part of from the Torah, and and so that's basically the Jewish sort of take on it, is that we believe that human beings have free will. That's why we don't believe in the Christian idea of original sin. We believe that the world is broken in the sense that it's not a perfect, godly, peaceful world, clearly. So we do believe, like with Christianity, that the world is imperfect and it's in need of repair. Um, Now the difference is that in Christianity they believe the world is actually completely broken and fallen, and that only God Himself, through Jesus and the whole Christian, doctrine, it can redeem the world. Whereas in Judaism, we believe that it's sort of a partnership between us and God. God is going to basically, sort of like earlier in the last video when we were talking about the general and the particular, God is going to take care of the big picture, the overall, um, and guide the course of history, because He's the master of history and of destiny. And we will take care of what's in our realm. We'll take care for our responsibility. We'll take care of our part. And so the idea is that together, working with God, we will repair the world in that sense. And now some people, they see this as very arrogant. They go, the Jews, they're so arrogant. They actually think that they can be partners with God. With God. They're men. They're human beings. They think that they're somehow equal with God, that the two of them together are going to redeem the world. The arrogance of these people, right? I could already hear it from the anti-Semites. Well, let me explain to you why that's not quite the way it is. But again, I gotta go check my tub. Okie doke. Alright, so what that concept is not saying that we think that we're equal to God. Chas v'shalom, God, heaven forbid. What it means, it doesn't mean that we think that we're equal to God. It means that we have been invited by God to partner with God. We're not saying that we already are on equal footing with God and that's why we're partners. No. God is the Father. He is the Master. He is the creator and the designer and the course setter and everything. He's in charge of all of it. There's no power that He doesn't possess. But the reason that we're partners is because He invited us to be partners. God extended out His hand and said, I want to have a relationship with humanity. And part of that relationship will be you and us working together as partners to fix the imperfection and the tikkun, the fixing, the repair of this imperfect world, that we're going to work together as partners. So it's not that we think that we're the same as God. God, heaven forbid. We say that we're partners in the repair of the world with God because God put out His hand and asked us to be. God invited us to be partners. That's what the whole thing at Mount Sinai was all about. It was God stepping into history, into the world of men, into the world of lived, real, actual events, and not just being some great, being or supreme being up there somewhere. He stepped into the world at Mount Sinai and spoke to us and said, we are creating a partnership. And the deed or the evidence of that partnership is called this thing, the Torah. And that's going to be our covenant. That's what the covenant is. The covenant is this partnership with God in the repair of the world. In a more particularistic context, the covenant is us agreeing to obey the Torah. But that's from just the pure Torah Shabbat, the written Torah, which is the Old Testament. That's what you learn out. But from the Talmud, we learn that there's much more layers to it, and that ultimately, really, it's actually this invitation of God inviting us to help in the repair of the world with him. So, with all that being said, I want to talk about 4 particular areas where this idea of moral agency comes in. Now, the first is going to be very interesting because it actually involves something I purchased. And I did not open it yet, so I'm going to open it now for you guys, and we're going to open it together. Now, before I do this, I want to bring something up. When I say that I advocate for violence against people who harm children, against people who are S*XUAL predators of children. When I say that I believe in violence against them and I believe in capital punishment for them, I want to make it absolutely perfectly 100% pitch perfect clear that when I say that, I mean the government should do it. We should vote in people into the government to represent us and push laws enabling the government to allow capital punishment for these monsters. I am not advocating for individuals to go out and commit vigilante justice of individual, violence against, unregulated, nor am I advocating for any sort of call to arms in a sort of mob rule, torches and pitchforks, let's go get the monster sort of mentality. Because both of those, I will say right now, for both legal and just to make my own personal position clear, I absolutely and completely condemn all acts of violence or criminality whatsoever against for civilians to commit against these criminals whatsoever. I 100% am advocating for the state to enact violence and capital punishment on these people, and I am advocating that we, the people, should vote in representatives to pass laws to let the government do this. So, for example, if I say we should kill child molesters, I am not saying that you should go buy a gun, go find a predator and kill him. No. And if you did do that, you should go to prison. Because that's wrong. Because you are not the law. You are not judge, jury, and executioner. What I am saying is that we should vote in politicians who will push for laws to allow the government to take the lives and to kill child molesters. Yes. That I am advocating. I am advocating for capital punishment for child molesters on the state level, not on the individual vigilante or mob rule or mob justice level. Not at all. I completely and 100% unequivocally condemn any such notion. I advocate purely 125% for government action, not individuals, and not for vigilante justice or mob rule. That being said, let's look at this really cool t-shirt I bought. Now, the thing about this t-shirt, I kind of bought it just for the show, just for the YouTube channel, because I can't wear this anywhere. You're gonna see. I can't wear this anywhere. There's no way I could wear this anywhere. I mean, it's weird because, like, I feel like if I wore it anywhere, some people would be like, oh, that's cool. but like also it's a bit much. But then other people, they might be like, yeah, like I mean I agree with the sentiment, but it's a little over the line, So, unfortunately, I can't really wear it anywhere. Maybe if I have maybe God willing, one day, if I meet someone and I have a family and we have a home, I can wear it in our backyard during barbecues and have my friends compliment it. But other than other than that, I can really only wear it for the show. Although I did see a review. First of all, I got it on Amazon. And it's free speech, by the way, so I'm not breaking any laws by this wearing this shirt does not violate any laws, because I checked. I'm like, is it like advocating for violence or something? No, it does. It's free speech, so it's protected under free speech. I even like the color. Okay, you guys ready for this? Check it out. There we go. I love this shirt. I can't wear this anywhere. But it was so cool, I just had to get it for the show. Just because it's so cool. I might hang it up in my room. Like people, like hang up like jerseys in their rooms? I might hang it up in my room like jersey style. That could be something. Then that way it's not a complete waste of money. And it wasn't very expensive. It was like $10. Even with shipping, even after shipping and everything, it was only like $12. Um, uh, After shipping and taxes and everything, $12.95. So I figured, what the hell, it's a cool shirt. Anyway, so I guess then the first place I want to delve into, the first example I want to delve into, is in regards to child predators and all that. Now, I don't really talk about personal, like, well, I do talk about the fact that I do have a personal relationship to this issue because it happened to me when I was a kid, and so but I don't talk about the details on here because that's private and that's really not very appropriate for a YouTube channel, and also I just really don't like to think about it, like about those details. So I'm not going to tell you about my own experience or my own story. If anybody really wants to know, I actually, honestly, too bad. I'm not going to tell you. It's not because I don't want to. It's just I don't like thinking about it. I don't like dwelling on it. So, um, I'm not going to, I'm not going to talk about it. But as what I always do talk about, what I talk about frequently, is my hatred for these people. And the thing is, these people deserve our hatred. They're not really well, obviously they're not normal people, but it's more than that. It's much more than that. They're evil. They're evil people. Now, that you could like talk philosophically and debate ethics and morals, but let's just break something down really simple. Let's talk about let's talk about evil for a minute. Let's talk about evil. in the film Nuremberg 2000 with Alec Baldwin, which tells the story of the Nuremberg trials, there's a couple scenes with Sergeant Gilbert, who was he was the psychologist in charge of he's one of the psychologists in charge of studying and questioning the top Nazi officials while they were in prison. And one of the things he says in the film is he says to Alec Baldwin's character, Justice Jackson, a blessed memory, because Justice Jackson was a real person, and he was a tzaddik. He was a righteous person because he persecuted those evil people. There's the scene where Sergeant Gilbert, who also is all these people were real people in real life that these characters are playing, these actors are playing, and yet at one point he says to Justice Jackson, Sergeant Gilbert says, I'm looking for the nature of evil. I'm trying to understand the nature of evil. And then at one point later in the movie, they're sitting around. They're sitting and chatting. And at one point, they're sitting and chatting, and Sergeant Gilbert looks over at Justice Jackson, and he said, at one point, I told you that I was looking for the nature of evil. He goes, well, after studying these men and really giving this a lot of thought, I believe I may have found it. And this is going to go perfectly into the next part of this video. He says, I believe that evil ultimately is based in a lack of empathy, a genuine inability to feel for your fellow man, for your fellow human being. He goes, I believe that might be the nature of evil. And I forget the exact line, but Alec Baldwin, Justice Jackson, goes, Doc, this isn't the exact line, but it's something like, Doctor, you may be onto something with that one. So, sliding perfectly into this, I have mentioned previously in other videos about a documentary that I saw, where and how I had spoken with in my last video, I mentioned that I had actually spoken via email with a psychologist who made a video in the 90s that you could see online. I believe the video is called Sex, Abuse, and Lies, or something like that. And it's a two-part documentary where she interviews different types of child predators, and going from the most benign, if you will, to the most severe, which we talked about. We don't need to dwell on those horrific details again. I mean, this video is already gonna be kind of tough enough as it is, especially with what we're about to get into, so we don't need to dwell on that. But you guys remember I talked about that there was an individual identified only as Gerald, which is why I wrote to this lady to get more information. Well, since then, I found out that this lady is actually quite a pioneer in the field. I mean, this lady that I talked to, it turns out, I didn't even know this. I've just found this out. She's not just some random psychologist that made a video somewhere. She's actually like a well-respected, like award-winning doctor in the field, and she's like an expert. She's a pioneer in research in the field of child predators, and understanding them, and in understanding victims and helping them, and in trying to prevent future evil. from happening to children. And she's amazing. I mean, we were talking before about, like, I was saying how Justice Jackson was a righteous person. This lady is a tzaddikus. This lady is a righteous woman. She is a godly, righteous woman. She is fighting darkness. She's made her career in saving lives. And make no mistake, anti-pedophile activism isn't about politics. It's not about philosophy. It's not about any of that. At its core, I mean, it is about all that, but ultimately, its foundation, it's about saving children's lives. Because let me tell you something. Even children who, do not wind up ultimately as adults later in life or whatever, self-deleting over what they suffered, still living with the scars of it for the rest of their lives is bad enough. Because even if you harm a child, you're not just harming their body. You're not just harming a developing mind and body. You're harming a growing soul. Their psyche, their emotions, the way they view the world, the way they feel about things. You're harming that inside of them as well. You're not just hurting their mind and their body. You're harming their spirit. And in a way, that's almost worse than the other two. Because your spirit, your neshama, that's who you are at your that is the divine light. That is the spark of, we all have a spark of the divine in us. That's why we're created in God's image. Our souls are, although God is singularity and he's not made up of parts, metaphorically speaking, every soul is a piece of God. Like if God is a giant roaring fire, every human soul is a spark from that fire that can never be extinguished. And so when you harm a child, like, you harm their soul, which in a way, like we just said, every soul is like a part of God himself. So in a way, you're harming God, if you think about it. Also, there's the concept that the Shekhinah, which is the divine presence, or Christians often call it the Holy Spirit, although the Jewish understanding of it is very different from the Christian. We don't view the Shekhinah as a third person in the Godhead or whatever like that. The Shekhinah is the presence of God. So there's God, right? And then the presence of God personifies into the Shekhinah, which Shekhinah is feminine. It's the Hebrew and feminine, which is the feminine side or the feminine aspect of God, because God is complete in every way, and so therefore he has a feminine and a masculine aspect. Now, does that mean that God is non-binary or whatever? No. God is above everything and above gender, obviously. But God in his pure essence, which is called Ein Sof, so God's, for lack of a better term, body, which is completely unknowable, is beyond everything. But as he relates to the world and the universe, he takes on gradations of, like, filters, so that he can interact with us through them. And his power being the ultimate has to be filtered down, or the purity of the light, his divine light, we couldn't live. Like he said to Moses, no man can see my face and live. And so that's his way of interacting with the world. And so so the Shekhinah is when God is near, or he's about to be near somewhere, his presence will ascend to prepare for him, for his coming. And his presence takes on, in Kabbalistic thought, a personification of feminine personification. Now again, it's not literally that the Shekhinah is a female person or female, humanoid or something like that. No, but it's the energy and the of God's presence. The Shekhinah is relating to a more feminine energy in Kabbalistic understanding, and so the Shekhinah suffers the pain of innocent people, of the Jewish people when they're persecuted. All the pain and suffering in the world is felt as well, because the Shekhinah, to a certain extent, is in exile before it can fully reunite with God. These are all very deep Kabbalistic things, but ultimately the Shekhinah is always close, or you could say she is always close to the most downtrodden and forgotten, and the suffering and the orphan. The Shekhinah is close to them, and so these children who are being harmed, the Shekhinah feels the pain of all innocents that are harmed. So when you're hurting these children, when these people are hurting these children, it hurts the Shekhinah as well. So it literally is hurting God. So there's a case. I'm reading her book. She wrote a memoir about her career, because she's now retired. She doesn't do this stuff anymore, but she had this long career, and she wrote lots of books. And so I'm reading her memoir one about her time in this field and everything, and how she got into it, and it's interesting. And in there, she brings up a case study from throughout the book. She'll bring up case studies relating to different parts of her journey or whatever. It's interspersed with these really hard to read case studies. Not hard to read because they're hard to understand, but I mean, they're hard to take. And there's one of them which I read in the book, and I had to put the book down for a few days and just process this. So hold on, give me 1 second. Sorry about that. So let me just preface this with a disclaimer that this next few minutes is going to be very, very dark. And especially because it's YouTube, I'm going to try not to be graphic. So I'm speaking a little bit of coded language because for YouTube. But it'll be apparent, you'll get it. So, because I read this story and it affected me so deeply, on a heart level, that, when I tell you this story, you'll understand why. I mean, obviously, everybody hates these monsters anyway, so it's not like you need convincing or anything, but or it's not like it's a mystery or anything. But after I tell you about this case that I read that affected me so deeply, you'll understand why I like to wear shirts like this. Okay, so I would say, you know what? Yeah, let's give it a 20. Oh, I'm just looking at my timer. Hold on. Okay, so for the next five, let's say if you don't want to hear this, skip ahead by 5 minutes. It's on the 40-minute mark here. So, yeah. So, if you don't want to hear this, well, actually not 5 minutes. Skip the next 3 minutes. So skip to 43. Skip to 43 minutes in and on if you don't want to hear this. Or no, you know what? Let's say 44. Yeah. At the 44-minute mark, skip to the 44-minute mark if you don't want to hear this, because it is a lot to take in. So, with that being said, I read this case study and it was it blew my mind. Okay, it's not even long. It's very short, but it sits with you. Basically, the study said that there was a father who had a girl that is between the numbers of 7 and between the numbers of 8 and 10. See, this is the YouTube version of it. I have to say, I have to make this. I have to dance around it. So she was in the numbers